Welcome, boys and girls. Welcome to the Burgundy Gold Knuckleheads podcast. And as always, sitting right over there, you know who it is. It's my main man, Reggie. What's up, Reg?
It is. What up, Kenny?
Oh, man, just trying to get through the spring here. Get through this time of year, you kind of have a lot of lulls in the NFL season. But we just got through the draft.
We did.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that here in a few minutes. But besides that, the spring weather is here, so get out and about and yard work and anything that you like to do outside before the deep heat of summer gets here.
Before the hell heat arrives here in Dallas.
Yeah. For those that don't know, we are behind enemy lines here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, even though we're both diehard Washington fans and running a podcast here from Dallas-Fort Worth. But here in Texas, at 2:00 in the afternoon on August 12th, you don't want to be outside.
No, it's 1,000 degrees. It's 1,000 degrees here, and it's not even in August, Ken. It can be in June. It can be in July.
I was just using that. I was just using that date as a random date, but even in a pool, you'd be like, man, it's too hot to even be in the pool here, man.
I'm telling you, it feels like 1,000 degrees here, man. When it's not outside, I'm just glad and thankful that I have a job that I'm indoors. I'm not outside working in this kind of heat, man. But it is. That's summer here in Texas, as we say.
Yeah. And we haven't done a podcast in about 2 weeks. Life has been moving along, and people get busy with life, right?
That's it.
And
do a little traveling, take a little vacation. Work happens.
Was it international travel, Reg? Was it international?
Man, come on, man. I just took a little time off, Ken. Just
okay. Hey, I don't want all right. We won't let the world know your exotic vacations, traveling the world. But let me tell you, boys and girls, I don't know all the details, but I promise you'd want to go on that vacation. You'd want to go on that vacation. If you were on a game show and the curtains opened up and you won that vacation, you'd be jumping for joy, man. You'd be jumping for joy. You won the grand prize.
Oh my God, this guy. He's lying, y'all. Just let me just say once again, the lying continues.
Let me just say he wasn't down at the creek fishing for a few days. Let's just put it that way.
No, I don't fish anyway, man.
I know exactly.
I grew up fishing, but once I became an adult, I stopped fishing. I eat fish, though. I love it.
I mean,
and I just took a little time off, man.
You can fish from your yacht if you have to, but that's just not what you do. I understand.
I don't own a boat.
What's that?
So I don't own a boat.
Oh, okay.
But I did, man. Just went on a little trip, man. That's
good.
Little something I haven't done in a while, and just starting to get back into the traveling mode. I like to travel a little bit, and so we just did a little bit of traveling, man.
I like it.
Just went upstate. Went to New York, to be specific, folks. I went to New York. Saw some friends up there and stuff. So that was it. Nothing major, nothing big.
Yeah.
Ken's as the old people like to say, Ken's a fibber. He's fibbing.
I'm painting the picture.
My man's over fibbing.
Well,
but it was good. It's good. It's a good trip, man. Good trip. Glad to be back home. And while I was gone, the NFL draft did take place. Right.
Yeah,
we will get into that a little bit here, which is the purpose of this particular podcast. I want to talk about the draft and the players we picked and our thoughts on the draft and our thoughts on some of these players and all that kind of good stuff, man. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we'll get into the draft, but the NFL also announced earlier today that and I don't understand, they said that they're going to target the schedule being released May 11th. I mean,
right.
It is or it isn't. right? We're targeting letting you know what your schedule is. We're delayed a couple days because
Maybe,
for whatever ridiculous
maybe
reasons.
working out some wrinkles, man. You know how they probably try to get these marquee matchups, and after some of these trades and things,
Yeah,
maybe they're just trying to move some dates around a little bit,
yeah. They
But
got for- they got an endless budget with plenty of staff to be able to do that. So I'm going to say they're going to get it done by the 11th. But when it comes to the schedule, I got a few requests by the NFL. I know they're listening. Roger Goodell tunes into the show.
he's a friend of the show.
He is a friend of the show. We might have him on if Roger, reach out to us. We'll get you on the show.
Yeah.
But couple simple things I want from a Commander's perspective. I don't want any NFC East team week 1. Right? I don't know why. I don't want to play Philly. I don't want to play the Giants. I don't want to play Dallas week 1. Rest of the year, I don't care.
Why not week 1?
Because it's too impactful. To be blunt, I'd rather have what I perceive as being an easier game week 1, especially with a if you want to call it a rookie quarterback in Sam Howell. Get the rust off, get everything kind of going, get that win, and hopefully the win, and then kind of get into a groove of everything. Again, that's my preference.
Okay.
My other request would be no Thanksgiving game. I do not like Thanksgiving. I will like watching other teams play, but I don't like Washington being there because they're in Dallas, and it throws a big wrench into going to the game, not going to the game, sitting with family. Because if I sit with family and I'm watching the Cowboys play whoever, I'm play the Miami Dolphins, if I miss a handful of plays, no big deal, keep on going. But if the Commanders are playing and food is being served at the same time, and they're asking for my help, somebody's going to be let down,
right?
Because I'm watching the game.
I feel you.
Okay, and then the last request is all these requests are utterly ridiculous, but
I don't think they're ridiculous at all.
Yeah, the last one is all 17 games must be played on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. noon.
I spoke too soon. That is ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that would be my last ridiculous request. I know we'll probably have a primetime game or two, but keep those 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central Time games just off my schedule, if at all possible.
Well, just real quick, I think you're going to be highly disappointed because I think week 1 we will probably play NFC East. In fact, I'm going to say we're going to play the Giants. We're going to play the Giants week 1. So we're going to play a division game. In terms of the noon game versus the noon/1 o'clock game, it's noon for us being in the Central Time Zone. But the reason we're going to get some 3 o'clock/4 o'clock games this season is because we play the NFC West.
Right, the West Coast, correct.
And because we played those games, except for the 2 games that will be played in our home, 2 of those games will be played in either Arizona, San Francisco, the Rams, or Seattle, which I think the 2 we get on the road is Seattle because we talked about going.
Right.
And then the 49ers, that game will be in California. I think I think the Rams and the 49ers, we will play in D.C. So 2 of those games will be late games unless they play on Thursday or Sunday night.
Yeah. And like I said, I know that's utterly ridiculous. That one is not going to happen. But
I don't like those late games either. I prefer our 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock Eastern start.
Yeah, if I know it's a 1 p.m. Eastern, I can plan my whole 17 out of the next 18 Sundays. I know exactly where I'm going to be at what time. I even know what chair I'm sitting in. Right? We have our own table, our own chair, our own spot.
We got a little reserved spot at the bar, where we go watch the games on Sundays.
Yes,
and those afternoon games throws a wrinkle to the people that are there before us, and it becomes a madhouse. And if anyone's
people before us just need to get the hell out of there, right? Your team lost, get out of there.
Yeah. But I tell you what, man, when I lived in Hawaii and And
there we go. International borderline. That's about as close to international travel as you can get without
no, sir.
international travel. But
No
there you
passport
go. There you
required,
go,
sir.
ladies and gentlemen.
No passport required. But when I lived in Hawaii, man, the games would come on like 8, 9 a.m. and you watch the game and you got the rest of the day, man. It was great. It was great because you get up, you got to get up early.
Yeah.
You watch the game. But when the game is over, you got all day to go do whatever else you need to do that day.
Yeah. I mean, I see the point in that, but at the same time, when I'm watching a game, people are drinking beer and eating hot wings. I'm not eating a bowl of Fruit Loops
Get used to
with
it,
the
man.
game on.
You get used to it. You kind of appreciate the early start. I'm telling you.
Yeah,
You got all day to go do. And when you win, and of course, back when I lived in Hawaii, we were the Redskins, and the Redskins were pretty good.
Right.
And so, a lot of times the game was over, man. We win. Cowboys was losing. Tell you, it's a good day.
Oh yeah. Oh, you got the whole day to.
Oh
I
man,
mean, you're going out everywhere wearing your gear
good.
too, right?
Feeling good, man. Sunday all day Sunday.
Knocking on the you might not have played with your friend that's a Cowboy fan for the last week and a half, but man, you're gonna play with him that day.
Yep. That was good.
Knocking on his door.
It's good times.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I can dig it. But yeah, so the schedule's coming out. We'll find out what we're doing with that. But let's do a little draft talk if you're fine with that.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. That's what the people want to hear, I'm sure. Yeah. Get our takes on the draft, on the picks, our thoughts. Here we go, man. So of course, I was on vacation, as I mentioned earlier, when the draft took place on Thursday night, round one. Round one. And we were texting back and forth about it. And
all the way up until our pick, right? We're talking about how things were laying out and what teams got what and who was dropping. And yeah, go ahead, take it over.
No, and the draft was just kind of unfolding in a very weird way. And one thing I learned about the draft this year, and probably it started the past few years, teams are no longer treating the draft in the standpoint of trades being an abnormal type of thing.
Right.
Moving up and trading picks is becoming more the norm. Right. Even draft day trades of players.
Right.
But certainly moving up and moving down within the draft seems to be becoming more part of the draft day experience as analytics is becoming part of football.
Right.
Right. I mean, they set a record in the terms of number of trades over this 3-day week. And I think they had set a record of number of trades within the first 2 days of the draft. But nonetheless, it was just record-breaking trades between teams. It's no longer about trading with a team within your same division. And none of this seems to matter. It just seems like GMs are willing and dealing and collecting 2 picks in later rounds, and they're taking that and packaging it with something else and moving up. And if they see a guy they want, they go get it. And they don't give 2 cents about what Mel Kiper and any of these other guys think about whether or not they're reaching for a player.
Right.
They see a player, they want a player, they go get the player. And so with that being the case, the draft gets off right away. And teams are trading, teams are moving up, moving back, then moving back up. And, Houston obviously comes in with the number 2 pick. First of all, they went quarterback, and then they traded out and traded back up and got a number 3 pick. I mean, it was just wild.
Right.
And so because of that, the way the draft was unfolding, when we were getting to the 16th spot, a lot of players that had been connected to Washington at the number 16th pick was sitting there. So I was like, man, what are we going to do with it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, one thing, you commented on all the trades and everything in the NFL and how it's changed. Outside of Chase Young pick, right? Outside of Chase Young, I'll go ahead and say that Rivera and staff, one thing, they're not as predictable, right? As players fall, and they've fallen for, a couple different years here. Certain players have fallen, they've taken them, or you pass over them, or you have a glaring hole maybe in a draft that you get none of them, or an area where you're strong and you go get one or two of them. And it's, I think we talked about it before the podcast that for the most part, any team is going to have room for improvement at certain positions, but
Mhm.
the Commanders are a solid team after free agency, right? We knew that there was some offensive line issues. They went out and they got a couple offensive linemen right off the bat. So going into the draft, they could kind of go with the approach of a best available player. Now, granted, you do have some target areas that you want to get, or you don't want to overload on one specific position,
Right.
but they I wouldn't have thought as we go down through this draft and some of their picks that they would have picked necessarily a player here or there. You look at it, okay, that was a good pick or whatever. But there's a few times where I was scratching my head, but I'm like, okay, they know what they're doing. They've had some success in the third, fourth, fifth round on some players.
Right.
But it's not the player that I would have taken. I saw some players that had fallen that were maybe late second, first round picks that are all of a sudden there in the third round. I'm like, man, we got a shot at this guy. He's fallen, and Washington pass over him as well.
But here's the other thing. I no longer believe that. I think I treat it as an old wives' tale. NFL teams do not draft best available. If you watch that draft, teams didn't pick best available. Teams picked the best available player based on what they need, not best available. That's like an old wives' tale, man. That mantra hasn't been around in years. I don't care what people say, man.
It's hard for the first round, right? For the first round, it's hard to go with best available. You may have best available player in one of these two or three positions, but yeah, you're not. There's no way Washington was going to take a defensive lineman.
Exactly. But if the defensive line is best available,
right.
So right. Jalen Carter was sitting there at 16, just as an example.
Right.
We picking Jalen Carter?
I would have been shocked.
He's best available player. Do you think we pick him?
Personally, I don't. But I'm going to tell you, Ron Rivera and staff, I don't think are that predictable on the draft. And maybe I'm so out of touch that of a handful of the players, and by no means a draft expert, but I went out there and kind of, I'll say there was 15 to 20 players that I looked at, and a lot of times it was based on the Commander's needs, right? And so I'm looking at a handful of this position, a handful of that position. I start looking at people that maybe might fall for a different reason. Oh man, maybe he'll slide to the third round and things like that. But pretty much every single time the Commanders were on the clock, I picked the wrong player. And I didn't go through, I didn't sit there and listen to all 7 rounds, but I, at least the first 4 rounds when I was sitting there and I was paying attention, I was wrong every single time. Right.
So with that being the case, here we go at pick 16, just to get to our first pick. And Will Levis is sitting there. He has fallen in the draft. There was a couple of offensive linemen who were still available that had been connected through us through mock drafts. And then there was Christian Gonzalez, considered one of the top 2-3 cornerbacks in the draft, sitting there available.
Right. Levis and Gonzalez were the 2 big names, to your point.
That was still sitting there at pick 16.
And the question was, are they going to go to quarterback?
And I told you no.
Right. And it's like, all right, they said they weren't, but they also weren't talking about the scenario of one of the top what was considered one of the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks dropping to 16, right?
What I thought was going to happen is they were either going to pick Gonzalez or they were going to trade out because someone was going to want Will Levis.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was thinking.
Right.
And then they picked. But not only did they pick Ken, they hurried up and got the pick again.
Oh,
right?
immediately.
They didn't hesitate. The pick is in.
Yeah, they had the paper filled out and ready to hand as soon as they were on the clock.
I mean, it was like
clock
the pick is
started.
in.
They gave a 10-minute window or whatever their window is, and 3.5 seconds in, they had the pick. Yeah,
and they picked Emmanuel Forbes.
Yeah,
and as I'm watching the draft, I found myself like mouth wide open, like, because I'm like, okay, I'd heard Emmanuel Forbes. I know that Fred Smoot was a big proponent for Emmanuel Forbes because of being an alumni, and he's been talking. And he's been from Mississippi State, Fred Smoot's alma mater. And there was a lot of Fred saying how this kid would fit in. He's a ball hawk and all those things. And I must admit, I thought Fred was being a little bit of a homer. I don't think Fred would just say the kid was good just because he played at Mississippi State. But I did think Fred was hyping him just a little bit because he was being a homer. But I did feel like the kid could play.
Right.
And then, oh, by the way, there was the kid from Maryland, Banks. But we went with Emmanuel Forbes.
Right.
And unlike a lot of folks on Twitter, I didn't hate the pick. I was just surprised by the pick.
Yeah.
And Christian Gonzalez goes number 17 directly behind us.
Correct.
And I'm like, okay. But I had read enough and heard enough about Emmanuel Forbes and how he fits within our system. There was a few concerns about Christian Gonzalez, but everyone thought that Emmanuel Forbes just fit what we do in our scheme and in our system. And with that, I didn't hate the pick. I was surprised by it, but I was like, okay, cool. We picked a position of need, which was a corner. We just didn't pick the one that everyone had mocked us to, just like last year. Everyone knew we needed a receiver.
Right.
But we went and got the one that we felt like the organization went and got the guy they felt like would fit best, just not the guy that everyone thought we would get. So I was like, okay, cool. Emmanuel Forbes, man. Then they showed his bio and a little bit of his resume. I'm like, okay, let's go. Let's go, Forbes. Let's go.
Oh, and with Forbes, I mean, to your point, he was a lot of people considered him the 3rd or 4th best cornerback.
And in some cases, 5th.
Pardon me?
And in some cases, he was the 5th.
Yeah. Kind of unanimously, I think everybody put Witherspoon that was drafted. He was a top 5 pick, top 6 pick, somewhere in there.
I don't remember.
An early pick, right? Mm-hmm. And then on most people's boards that look at anything, it was Gonzalez,
Christian Gonzalez.
And so when Forbes comes up and you see his chart, I mean, there's only one glaring concern, right? Because you see his highlights, you see him, he had 14 interceptions. He came out as a junior, right? So 14 interceptions, 6 were returned for TDs, and fast guy,
which is a record, by the way, which is a record.
Yeah,
he holds the record.
His combine was a 4.35 40, lightning fast guy. And then you realize why he's so lightning fast. Because
come on, man.
Because wearing a helmet, pads, and in the soaking rain, he's 166 pounds. Does not mean the guy can't play. But at 166 pounds, I mean, I didn't know it. I thought there was in Pop Warner, you could only be so heavy to play at Pop Warner. The kids that were just enormously big in Pop Warner, they weren't allowed to play. I thought there was a minimum weight standard to play in the NFL. I guess it was 165, and he just squeaked in. Ate a big steak dinner the night before, and
if you guys if you're watching this on YouTube, then you can see my face. But if you're not and you're just streaming this and listen, let me tell you something. Ken and I talked Okay, we talked, I think, the following day about Emmanuel Forbes being the pick.
Yeah.
He is underselling his shock and amazement and his displeasure with the buck 60 of Emmanuel Ford. Ken was extremely concerned. You're downplaying. I want you to tell the people you were very, very extremely concerned about this kid being 160 pounds. He's
I was
underselling it
shocked.
right now.
I was shocked. I did not dislike the pick. Okay, the kid can play. He is a player. He reads well. He breaks quick on the ball. I mean, clearly at 4.35 speed, he's a fast kid. But he's going to be going up against. My concern is he's going to be going up physically against big wide receivers in the NFL. And yes, you can run, but you also need to check them. You need to fight for the ball. You need to do these types of things. And my concern is not that he's not going to be successful, but he's going to get manhandled in a physical perspective. I hope we don't see a highlight film like when Henry just threw what's his name,
Josh.
Yeah. Like a rag doll. I hope that's not in the future for number 13, Emmanuel Forbes of the.
It may. Listen, you play enough football, man. You're gonna get on somebody's poster. But here's the thing, Ken. As they pointed out, Emmanuel Forbes played in the SEC, right? Those are usually your top D1 guys, your blue chip guys. Most of them. He held up just fine. The good news is he's not a linebacker at 160 pounds. He's not a defensive lineman at 160 pounds. So his position allows him to be a little light, and meaning
a little light, man. If he had a pocket full of quarters, he'd still be light. Well, come on, man.
But the bottom line is the position allows where receivers can't push off, receivers can't hold them, and everybody's got to go get the ball. So the only concern I would say I would have a little bit would be if it would be his support in the run game. Right. If all of a sudden the receiver runs a route, but yet there's a running back in the flat, and he's got to turn around and go and tackle somebody coming out of the backfield. That's really my only concern. But with that being the case, I got to believe that they're going to get him in the weight room. You watch his highlight, man, you don't realize the kid's 166 pounds just because he doesn't play small. He doesn't play like a thin, skinny guy. He gets in there and puts his heads in there, and he makes the tackles, and he do everything he needs to do that you would expect out of the corner position. So I'm not too worried about his position. And again, I think now he'll get on the NFL's team, get with the right nutrition, put on the right amount of muscle in the right places, and he'll get stronger. So I'm not too worried about it personally.
Yeah. And like I said, when you look at any highlight film of him, his play is excellent. Yes. I make light of his weight, or lack of weight. But his play is fantastic. His play is fantastic.
It'd be fine. It's fine. Yeah. So round 2 comes around, and we didn't trade up. This is where a lot of people had mocked us to pick Hendon Hooker and or go offensive line. I think at this point was where I was thinking they would probably pick the kid out, the offensive lineman out of Florida. I can't think of his name now. Osiris, I think is his name.
Yep.
But I thought, okay, they're gonna either go. Maybe they do the quarterback thing. Maybe they go off the line here. But what are they gonna do?
Well, there was a linebacker or two that had that late first round that had slid basically halfway down through the second round. Yep. A couple linebackers there also that we to me we had a big glaring hole of. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So just basically, and so there was a lot of intrigue by me at this point in the draft as well, because like, again, a couple of different ways we can go here. What do we do? And we picked a safety slash corner guy, kind of a secondary utility type player in Jartavius Martin out of Illinois. And when you saw his highlight, he kind of played all over.
Right.
Outside as a corner, inside the slot as a corner. He can play safety. And you're like, man, they went secondary for the second pick in a row.
Right.
I was shocked.
I was shocked.
I was extremely shocked. But being shocked and being disappointed are two different things.
Right.
So I run the Twitter, and Twitter has lost their damn mind. Twitter had lost its mind.
That's the worst place. Going to social media on any kind of controversial pick. You know what? Even if it was any pick, right? We could have had the number one pick, picked whoever you think would have been the best fit, and Twitter
I understand that Twitter is not the best place, but I was trying to get a pulse of what people were thinking.
Right.
And Twitter had lost its damn mind, right? And I'm just like, you gotta be, come on, guys. Listen, was I surprised again? Yes, I was. But man, I saw that kid's highlight, and I'm like, okay, cool. So at this point, I'm thinking we've picked two secondary guys. People are forgetting Kendall Fuller, free agent at the end of this season. He was a high-priced free agent that we got from Kansas City. Has he lived up to the contract? Me personally, I don't think so. But he's 30, 31, last year of his deal. You got to prepare for the next time, right? We lost not Cam Curl. We lost Bobby McCain. We didn't re-sign him in the offseason. Cam Curl is due for an extension. There's contract negotiations. This is your next generation of guys. It gives you leverage in contract negotiation, people. It gives you depth, right? Look at our division. The Giants went out and got Waller. He's listed as a tight end, but he's a receiver. The Giants went out. I mean, we know who's in Philly, right? A.J. Brown and the kid Smith. And then in Dallas, you got to be able to have guys that can be flexible. You got to have your safety that, we love that hybrid position flexibility.
Right.
And if nothing else, moving on to the next guys after this season. I thought, listen, great picks. Surprised they didn't go O-line.
Yeah.
Because we know that we need it. But Ron them said in their postseason after the free agency, they were happy with what they did in free agency.
Right. And yeah, to your point, I was surprised that they went with safety. But I mean, he goes by Quan Martin. He's a good pick. If you're going with safety, that was a good pick in the second round. First thing that I looked at, was that he's 30 pounds heavier than our first round pick.
He should be.
I'm just kidding. But we, as I start, I looked and I saw highlights and you see how well he plays. I mean, there he played with Witherspoon, that was the number one cornerback. So you think that maybe Martin isn't getting possibly the recognition because everything is focused on Witherspoon.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's not uncommon that you start looking at one player and you realize, man, who's this other kid that just keeps standing out, right? And that's what happened to Martin. Not that he was ignored and all of a sudden he's this big shocking thing of a player. But they had Illinois had a good secondary back there. And yeah, 5'10", 194 pounds is what he listed at the combine. One thing that stood out, 44-inch vertical. All right. Now, you defending passes and you're running downfield and you can get up and you use that that's athleticism, right? That's just natural talent. When somebody has speed, when somebody can jump like that and do like that is just natural born talent.
Very athletic, man. And the athleticism is there. And I have no doubt that they fell in love with the fact that this kid can play multiple positions. And keep in
Yes.
mind, when Cam Curl went down, we saw a change in our defense. When he
Well,
came back, we saw a change in our defense. You
yeah.
got to have depth, folks.
Well,
And on top
I think also what it does is let's ignore injuries, right? We're 100% healthy, and let's say Martin is a significant playing time. If he's not starting, maybe he's the nickel that comes in all the time. When you have a player that like Martin that can play multiple positions, it gives the defense a lot of opportunities to make calls and disguise things because he can come up and blitz. He can come up and attack. He can drop back. He can cover a tight end. He can cover a wide receiver. You can use him in a lot of different scenarios. And I mean, they wanted to do that for a while with what's his name from the that started the Buffalo nickel here in Washington, Collins.
Landon Collins.
They try to use Collins in a few different ways. And I'm not saying that they're going to try and use him like that, but it gives you that flexibility defensively to do a lot more because your staff that's on the field, your players on the field can
Think
do a lot of
about the
different roles.
secondary that's potentially back there. You have Derek Forrest, Cam Curl, potentially Forbes, Martin, St. Juice, and
St.
Fuller.
Juice.
I mean, come on, guys. And listen, if you believe as a fan that the difference between our offense last year and potentially this year was the offensive coordinator, it's the same offense, guys. Right? Eric Bieniemy is going to make a difference with the playmakers that we have on this team. You want to go and draft, like some people talk about, we could have went some receivers and all this. It's like, and give them, who's going to get the ball? You only have one ball, man. You got to give it to the running back. You got to give it to Curtis. You got to give it to Dotson. You got to give it to Terry. And oh, by the way, you're expecting one of these tight ends to step up. It's like you can't keep drafting all these guys in the first and second round and then say we got to get them on the field. You can't do it. And the one place we know where we need some improvement is the defense and the secondary. And so I was okay with the pick. Again, I was surprised that they didn't go offensive line, but I wasn't like upset that they went with the safety out of Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to spend as much time on every single pick moving through here. But there was only one pick that for me, that was even when we're talking about the next day, right? I mean, sometimes in the moment you're like, what? We took him? What? We took him? And then you kind of process it. And sometimes it's even, a minute or two later, you're like, all right, now that I think about it, that wasn't a bad pick. That wasn't a bad pick. There's only one pick that I'm kind of so on, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Move on to the third round. And if there's any position the last 2 years where we have had more injury than any other team out there, it is probably the reason why we picked who we did in the third round.
Yep.
All right. We took Ricky Stromberg out of Arkansas, center. He has played some guard, but they drafted him with the intention of either starting or backup center on the team. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, at this point, it's the first O-line pick at this point.
Yeah, and I talked about as I was looking through it, and I didn't know anything about the guy. Normally when I'm looking at offensive linemen, the big name that you even look on offensive linemen typically are your tackles, right? Because sometimes there's a good tackle who might be undersized in college, and you recognize him, and he ends up coming to the NFL, and they moving him to guard because he's a little bit undersized or something like that. I mean, Brandon Sheriff, right? That was Brandon Sheriff. And so I honestly normally seldom am I ever familiar with any centers at all, even if they're a first round center. I know their name, but I don't really look at them. When I did look at him, how they rank and rate different people based off of different things, believe it or not, he was the number one how they categorize it, I don't have the stats. They listed him, and I looked through all the other players. He was the number 1 athletic center.
Okay.
Right? You think, oh man, how athletic of a center do you need? He's not a wide receiver, but
Right.
but he's able to pull. He's able to play guard. He's able to do things that, frankly, a lot of other players can't do. They just end up being big, big blocks that are in the way. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you got to be able to prepare for that. When you have an athletic center, an athletic period of any position, it helps the team. So hopefully Ricky Stromberg will be a tool that Commanders
Well,
are able to use.
well, for me, when I saw Ricky Stromberg name and the position, and I saw his highlight reel and I saw his resume, the thing that jumped out for me, that stood out for me, that I liked was the fact that he was a 4-year starter.
Yep.
Yeah, he had played guard, but he was primarily center. He was a 4-year starter at Arkansas in the SEC, playing against all of those big schools with all those big studs in the middle. And yet this kid held his own and was practically a stud. So when we picked a center in the 3rd round, he's not coming in just as a body for camp. This guy's coming in, the 4-year starter out of Arkansas, picked in the 3rd round. He's coming to compete. He's coming to compete for playing time. And to your point, we've had injury for the last, I think, 3 years at the center position, which then throws our offensive line into chaos a little bit.
Right.
And that puts Chris Larson and Chase Roulier on notice. But I think Roulier has a good cap number, probably eligible for a restructure of his deal. And if nothing else, maybe he's going to be a June cut. But I'm telling you, between Roulier, Larson, this kid picked in the 3rd round, it's not coming in just for a camp body.
Right.
And so again, what I liked about him, that he's a 4-year starter. It wasn't like he had played guard and can play some center. Nope, he was a center and a 4-year guy. So for me, I was like, this is good. This is good, because everybody else that was signed for the most part in free agency had position flexibility, but these guys that were tackles that can play guard that can play a little bit of center, but they were primarily guards that can play some tackle and that type of thing. But this kid was brought in as a center, and I loved it. Loved it.
And they followed up kind of how they addressed the secondary with a 1st and 2nd pick. They took the center at 3rd pick, and they decided they were going to stick with that theme and go with Brandon Daniels, guard out of Utah, with a 4th round pick.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the things that, not that most people matter, but he was from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, out of Carrollton, Texas. So
okay.
from Reggie and my perspective, a local boy. But yeah, he'll be competing for guard, right? There's one guard position that we're not 100% sure who can compete. There's 3 or 4 names that we'll probably be fighting that off, or fighting for that job. And you can throw Daniel's name in the hat for trying to take that job as a rookie. It'll be a challenge for him, obviously, but
based on the guys that
people do that every year.
They brought in for free agency, I got to believe Daniels is a guy that's going to be somebody here to develop, because the guys they did sign, some of these guys on 1-year deal, I think 2-3-year deals. These are your guys that you hope Daniels develop and be the replacement for these guys down the road.
Sure.
So at this point, when you get into the draft, you're looking for guys that are just pretty much going to be your depth players that hopefully develop into starters down the road.
Right.
The only other thing I want to say about, if you want to get into these other guys, Ken, you can. But the thing about what shocked me a little bit about the 5th round pick was that they traded up. They didn't stay put in the 5th round. They traded up in the 5th and picked KJ Henry, the defensive end, out of Clemson.
Yep.
And what was interesting about that, let me get back to that. If you saw it on Twitter, You know how they show these players at home, and then when they show them getting the call, and then the family goes all crazy and everything. KJ Henry is standing there in his home, and the video starts it where his dad comes walking down the stairs, and his dad walks down the stairs wearing a Redskins jersey. And he's standing here trying to talk to the family or someone on the phone, and he sees his dad and his peripheral come down the stairs. And of course, he breaks out in laughter because I didn't realize it, but his dad is a longtime Washington fan. And here his son gets drafted by the team, and he's standing there with the Commander's hat, and his dad comes down there and was basically letting his son know, way to go, good job, you're going to play for the team. So that was a good moment to see. And the video was circulating around on Twitter and everything. So that was cool. But what was interesting, though, outside of that, was the fact that they traded up to get this guy. So when this guy got to the 5th round, it was interesting that they traded up to get him. And I don't know what that means, big picture wise.
Right.
But it's what was interesting is his position. He's a defensive end, and everyone knows that our 2 starting defensive ends are both on 1-year deals. Both will be free agents at the end of this season. So whether they're looking for KJ to be a rotational guy this year and next year, or if they're hoping he turns into something special, because we all know that more than likely one of these guys between Chase Young and Montez Sweat probably will not be Washington Commanders after this season.
Yeah, and you need to remember also, even as a role player, Shaka Khan Tony is not going to be around with the Commanders
due to suspension.
Due to a suspension, so there's a big hole there that hopefully KJ Henry will be able to snag and get some good playing time, because you're talking about Sweat and Young, and even if one of them goes down for a game or two, they're going to take a majority of the snaps on either end, but you need your 3 or 4 or at least 2 or 3 defensive ends that are going to rotate in to fill that role, as well as give breaks throughout the game.
Absolutely.
KJ Henry,
welcome to the squad, brother.
Yeah, be that surprise. The 6th pick was the one that I was not a fan of, even at this point.
Really? Okay.
They took Chris Rodriguez Jr. out of Kentucky, running back. I had zero problem with them taking a running back. They took for lack of better terms, they took a bruiser running back, and in a lot of ways, that's what we have. We've got a team full of bruiser kind of type running backs, to where I was hoping that they were going to go get that pass catching 3rd down scat back type of runner.
Okay.
What McKissick was before he got injured, in the role that he was playing, and Chris Rodriguez is not a pass catching running back. I mean, you can, one catch a game is all that he would do, but can he be a big bruiser? Can he contribute? Can he be special teams? Maybe. But like I said, you got Brian Robertson, Antonio Gibson, Jonathan Williams, and Jarrett Patterson. I was hoping for somebody dynamically different than those guys. And
well, those guys are different though from each other.
Yes, they are to some degree.
And how much more dynamic do you need? Do you need the running back?
I wanted a pass catching running back, to be honest.
Okay.
And that's just not Chris Rodriguez.
Well, here's my take on it, Ken. Here's my 2 cents. Right off the bat, I know nothing about Chris Rodriguez. Okay, just right off the bat, don't know anything about him. But I will say, any position, any skill position that the team was going to select, I didn't know who it would be, what position it would be, but I knew any skill position player was gonna have to have and probably got the buy-in of Eric Bieniemy. And we have to remember that with the offensive coordinator position change, so will our offense. So if they got this guy, then I have to believe that Eric Bieniemy was okay with the pick, and this must be something that Eric Bieniemy wanted. I read online. I couldn't substantiate it. I don't remember who stated it, but supposedly Eric Bieniemy pushed for this kid. So again, I understand you wanted a type of running back. How does that running back fit into what Eric Bieniemy wants to do with their offense? I don't know the answer to that, and we won't know until the season start. But he clearly, as a former running back, sees what we have on our team, has a vision for how he's going to plan to use those guys. And if this was the kind of guy that he felt like he needed and was going to be a good pick in the 6th round, then I got to trust and believe that there's a reason he picked the guy. And I don't know what that reason is. But that was why I was okay with the pick. It was a curious pick, but I was like, okay. But
Yeah.
again, I knew nothing about Chris Rodriguez, but I'm going to believe in what they're doing with Eric Bieniemy as the OC and to see how our offense is going to look next year, because I do believe it will be different than what we've seen in years past.
Yeah, I don't disagree with your point there. The Bieniemy had probably had a lot of input on anything on the offensive side of the ball. And again, I'm not questioning Eric Bieniemy's talent evaluation and skill set. Just to me, personally, it was a surprise. And when I look at Kansas City and how they use their running backs, yes, they run the ball, but they also used a lot of them out of the backfield. And right now, Antonio Gibson, Jonathan Williams didn't do a bad job last year, and maybe they'll use Brian Robinson more, because when we saw him in the preseason last year, he was very fluid catching the ball out of the backfield. And we kind of said throughout the year that Scott Turner wasn't using him like that.
Exactly.
And maybe Bieniemy's fine using him more like that. And he's like, no, we already got those guys out of the backfield, guys on the team currently, and we're going to end up using Chris Rodriguez as the hammer.
And so between Antonio Gibson catching the ball and the point you just made, Robinson catching the ball, we may already have our pass catching running backs in our offense, and he's fine with that. So,
right.
And so that was kind of my take on it.
Yeah. The last pick was Andre Jones Jr., edge rusher out of Louisiana. I mean, we're talking about a 7th round pick, right? So, but he's definitely one of the things that stood out to me was he was a little undersized. On the edge rusher nowadays, they're not necessarily as big as what they used to be. Smaller guys can do well if you've got good technique and you're very quick off the ball. But at 248, he is what Forbes is at cornerbacks. He is that on the edge type of player.
I got him listed as a linebacker. You got him listed as an edge rusher, huh?
That's what I have him at. Now we'll see how they use him. I mean, there are people that that will be able to transition because they're quick enough, they're fast enough. I mean, at the same time, Kerrigan, for his career, most of his career was listed as a linebacker, even though he wasn't, right?
But we use a lot of 3-4.
Depending on how you're using them is deceiving. But hopefully he comes in and he contributes and makes the team. And to go back to last year, I believe last year every single draft pick made the team and contributed. Right? It seems like there's a 4th round pick, a 6th round pick most years that don't quite make the team. Whether it's them, whether it's the evaluation, whatever it is. Sometimes it's injury. Last year, every single player made the team and contributed. Let's hope we go 7 for 7 this year.
Yeah. Either way, I didn't have any problem with the draft. Um, I thought it was good. Certainly, there were some players that were on the board in some of these picks that we thought that they would pick, but they didn't. They got the guys they wanted, man. And so I'm going to trust and believe Ron them has done for the most part a fairly decent job, man, in drafting. A lot of our guys are still homegrown. They picked these guys, so at this point, I'm not going to start questioning them now.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Whatever they're doing, the process they're doing, the scouts that they're using, the reports that they're getting, and the way they're analyzing these players, I got no reason to think anything different and to go otherwise, man. So I'm not gonna start now. They may not have been the names that people wanted. They may not have been the name that the Adam Schefters and the Mel Kipers of the world had predicted, but that's why they do what they do, and the
yeah,
GMs and the scouts do what they do, man. So
yeah. I was going to say this from a commander's perspective. This was more when you kind of look at the draft and the people that they picked and the roles and like I said, a lot of these players we mentioned can play different positions, whether it's different positions on the offensive line, different positions from a safety. You can play safety, some corner, deep safety and up in the box. This was kind of like a workman's draft. Not a lot of flash, not a lot of spark and pizzazz in it. This is a workman's group, and if they hit, these are the type of players that become core players. Um, and like I said, time will tell, like every single draft. But
and if you know anything about Ron and Martin Mayhew, that's what they do.
yeah, yeah,
They just pick those workman type guys, man. Just come in, play football,
and,
and I guess you kind of hope that some of these guys will turn around and become Pro Bowlers and Hall of Famers, but this is what they do. They build football teams based off these workman type guys, man, and so you can't be too shocked that that's what they did.
well, and you look at and I don't know all for these players, um, but if I look at the last three or four, I guess the last few drafts, the players that we have kept, the players that we've let go, and compare the staff that we have now compared to, I'll just go back 5 years ago. It's a different breed of player. It is a it is the Jonathan Allens of the world. It is the Terry
Man, if you listen,
McLaurin
if
of
you
the
look
world.
at Jonathan
It
Allen,
is the
you
leaders and players who want to play, who want to win. They're not just there to collect a paycheck. It's the right attitude, it's the right approach, and my guess is that not only did Ron look at the talent, but he looked at the character of these players, and a lot of these players are going to have the same approach to football and professionalism that a lot of the current staff has right now.
absolutely. And if you look at it, as I was saying, John Allen, if you look at Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, and most recently, if you look at Deron, they did that. They did that video showing Deron walking into the facility to get his, to sign his deal and do everything. The guy look is about as awkward talking to people as awkward can be. He's very awkward. Big
Right.
old dude, but seemed to be very shy and awkward.
Right.
But yet you get him on the field and he's like a beast.
Yeah.
But when he walked in and shaking hands with Eric Bieniemy and Ron Rivera and talking to the staff, he's very quiet and just want to come in and do his work. And then when he puts on his cleats and his jersey and his pads, and now you get a different guy. And so
Right.
all those guys are very much, you look at their personality and you got to believe that's going to be a little bit of the team. It's going to be the personality of the locker room. These are your leaders of your team, your core players, and there is a common thread with a lot of those guys.
Yeah, those guys that you just mentioned in those examples, they're setting the standard for this year's group of players.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's how you change the culture. And I think the culture has changed.
Yep.
Our wins need to improve to match that ultimately. But hopefully the moves that we did this year, bringing in Bieniemy and a few other things that are going on. We don't need to kind of all go in on this particular podcast, but hopefully everything put together will we'll put more wins on the in more ticks in the win column than in the loss column coming up this year.
Collect more W's, man. That's what it's about.
Exactly. But that's all I got. Reggie, you got anything else, my man?
I don't, man. I don't. The new season is officially here, man. The draft is here. Now we get rookie camp. And then they're going to do a little bit more where the vets come in and do the OTAs and all those kinds of things, man. So we're slowly rolling. We're going to finally get to that lull in the season. I think it's June, I think.
Yeah, mainly June, right?
Yeah,
right.
when the players are off for a few weeks before they report to training camp. So it's coming, man. Season will be here before you know it.
Yeah, set up your international worldwide travel for June. That's the good time for it, man. So, but
that's all I got, man.
That's all I got. So until next time, knuckleheads, catch us on Twitter, Facebook, everything else. Peace out, knuckleheads.
Peace out, y'all.